Hello, GatorBait subscribers, and welcome into GatorBait TV. I'm Kassidy Hill, and we are joined today by Jacquie Franciulli of Rivals Gator Territory. We're going to talk a little early signing day, and Jacquie is working for one of the country's premier recruiting sites. Thank you for coming on today. I know you pay a lot of close attention to this. Wednesday, we're coming up on early signing day. This is 2 to 3 years now. We've had this early signing day.
The first time was when Dan Mullen was the coach here. Was the first early signing day. Yeah.
Right. So it's been an adjustment for everyone: coaches, players, media, fans. And this year, we're seeing, if I'm looking at the numbers correctly, Florida has 24 hard commits right now.
Right.
A good portion of them could be signing this week. How does that sort of change the landscape for what we can expect in February?
It actually helps Florida out a lot, and it actually helps a lot of coaches a lot. I know some coaches aren't in favor of the early signing day period, but for guys like Dan Mullen who have adapted well to it, it means that you don't have to focus on securing those 2020 guys in February, because what you can do in January is already prepare for your 2021 class, 2022 class, and get a leg up on your competitors that way. So by having most of your class signed now, your ability to hit the road in January and focus on those freshmen, sophomore, juniors, evaluate guys early, so then you're already working on 2 or 3 classes down the line. And that's something that Florida in its past and some of the other staffs kind of lagged behind a lot against the competition. We saw that in Jacquie and staff. A lot of times they wouldn't actually evaluate the younger guys, and then they would lose out, because when you got Clemson, they don't offer early, but they're still evaluating those guys early. Alabama offers them. You've got Miami and Florida State that offer them pretty early. So you got to compete with those guys. And the way they are able to do that now is because they already signed most of those guys in the early signing period.
Now, as we said, they have 24 hard commits as it stands right now. They might not all sign Wednesday, but a good portion of them are expecting to. Florida actually already has a couple of them on campus. We'll get to that in a minute here. But Jacquie, you and I were talking about the numbers earlier, because for so long, we've had the number 25 in our head. Right. Most classes sign 25 guys, whether now it be spread out over December and February, they sign 25 guys, and that's the number the NCAA encourages, that's the number that's allowed. So that's what you go into each signing class expecting. You expect 25 guys, and you can maybe adjust here and there depending on the scholarships you have available. When you have guys like Felipe Franks, Lucas Kroll, who have already announced they're leaving, those scholarships are available. But because of the early signing day and because of the transfer portal, how you work out those numbers is a lot different now. It's something we're still all learning. You explained it pretty well to me earlier, so I'm just going to defer to you here and let you explain it to the people.
Yeah, it's very complicated math, just because you have to consider how Florida has recruited in past classes. So, for instance, they were able to bring in a number of early enrollees in January. So, because 2 years ago, when Mullen only signed 19 players to that class, he had 6 left on that class, so you can back 5 of the early enrollees to that class from 2019-2018, which means...
So just to clarify, he could count some of those early enrollees towards the previous class. Correct. Since he didn't fill that scholarship number.
Exactly. So you count them back. So then this year, when you look at the early enrollees, he's got 5 more scholarships to play with. So you really have to kind of work those numbers in. You still have that 85 scholarship limit that the NCAA kind of tells you that you want to hit. But the problem that Florida has, and a lot of other college football programs, is that they haven't adjusted that limit considering the transfer portal. Because I know the biggest misunderstanding I've seen on our message boards and on social media is that the more the players transfer, the more scholarships you're able to get, and more players you're able to sign. That's not accurate. They still have to work with the counters and the limitations that they were given by the NCAA and the SEC. So Florida, if you're working out the counters and the math, they can only really sign 29 players, which includes guys from the transfer portal. Okay. So let's say if they have 6 guys transfer to the bowl game, that does not mean they have 6 extra scholarships available. So that is one of the biggest misconceptions when you see transfer, which is the reason why a lot of coaches are trying to see if the NCAA can adjust those limitations, because with the transfer portal, it kind of changes the game a little bit. So sometimes Florida actually got hit pretty hard this year. At one point, after injuries, Florida was dealing with only 61, 62 scholarship numbers out there. So Florida is one team that, is even Dan Mullen is saying we need to kind of adjust how we handle the transfer portal, because it is affecting a little bit of recruiting, because now you're thinking, okay, I have all these players in my transfer, but I can't actually recruit those spots. So right now we think Florida, from what we heard from sources and talking to people within the program, is that it possibly can go around 25 within this class, and obviously, like I said, they can reach up to 29, but you also have to factor in the transfers. They want to grab some transfers, and you also have to factor in guys like Wardrick Wilson. He was the defensive lineman that was signed last year, but with visa problems, he kind of got deferred to this year. He told reporters that it looks like it's January as a date, but one of the things that's kind of interesting is he might actually not count for this year. He'll count for the year that he signed, so last year. So that won't affect the numbers there, but Brenton Cox would affect this year's number, and also Jordan Pouncey, a transfer, will affect this year's number.
Yes, Wardrick Wilson, a Bahamas native, as we know, was a guy that Mullen really wanted to get in last class. Thought for a long time he would be able to. It was always, we're right there, we're right there, we're right there. They, of course, were not able to get him in. As Jacquie said, he has been telling reporters he plans to be here in January. We wish him all the best, but no offense to Wardrick Wilson, we've kind of heard that song and dance before.
Honestly, it's all about immigration.
Right.
No one really knows until you get the final word from immigration services.
You get the U.S. government and the NCAA together. That's a lot of red tape.
Exactly.
As you said, Mullen has spoken out about maybe we should change up the numbers rules with the transfer portal. Mullen's never been shy about calling out the NCAA. He's one of those more outspoken coaches with a lot of regards to them. But one thing the NCAA has changed that has worked to Florida's favor and has worked to Mullen's favor just in the past few days is that early enrollees are now allowed to practice in bowl practice. And as we learned today, the coach can actually address them, even if they have not signed their national letter of intent. And Florida has 3 of those guys. I'm going to make sure I remember them all. Anthony Richardson, Joshua Bryan, the offensive lineman, and the third one, Richard Leonard. Okay. Joshua Bryan was committed to Georgia a week ago.
Right.
Decommitted when Pittman was hired as the Arkansas head coach away from Georgia, and within 24 hours had committed to Florida, graduated last Thursday from Swanee High School, and then was on campus here in Gainesville Friday morning and has been practicing with the team along with Richardson and Leonard. We've seen some clips of them coming out. John Hevesy has tweeted about it, and then Dan Mullen addressed it today. How much extra help do you think that is for those guys, just being able to get in those, not 15, we learned, it's 12 extra practices for the bowl game, although I don't think they will be able to travel to Miami with them?
No, because they haven't enrolled in classes yet. So technically they're not still part of the team.
Right.
So they can't travel with the team yet. And actually, Florida actually took advantage of that in the summer as well. Like guys like Lloyd Summerall and Curry Elam were on campus before they enrolled as well. So this is something that Florida took advantage right away. And it's such a great thing for these players because, like you said, they already get 12 extra practices, and playing with some of the veterans that they might have been playing if they came here in January, and they're not going to have to wait till spring to get assimilated. They don't have to worry about classes yet, so they can just focus on football for 12 practices. And, you mentioned, bronze recruitment a little bit, how crazy it was. And I just have to take a moment to say that Florida did such a great job in that recruitment. I know a lot of people have told me on Twitter, well, it was accidental, Jacquie. You don't know what you're talking about. But to Dan Mullen and John Hevesy's credit, exactly. And that's something where I kept stressing was there are a lot of college teams that I've covered in the past that would simply stop recruiting a player after he committed to another program or not as intensely. Florida did not. Florida pursued Brom pretty intensely after he committed to Georgia. So when you have that sort of tenacity, Braun is still going to listen to you. So in a situation where you lose your position coach with the way the college football is, there is always a possibility, Florida was able to pounce. So that was a great job by Mullen and Hevesy. We always throw out the negatives out there when it comes to recruiting, when it comes to this staff, but that was one of the instances, and several instances actually when you're looking at closing this class, that this staff has actually stepped up their game.
They did that with Mordecai McDaniel as well.
Exactly. They did that, and then they have a chance to flip. Tim Smith from Alabama come signing day. He was just on campus over the weekend. So Florida has done a good job at closing. They're kind of the late wonder kids coming in and flipping guys right before early signing day. And having those guys on campus is great, especially a guy like Anthony Richardson, in my opinion. Mullen said that, the guys on the line have been rotating with the twos. Richardson's already looking at, the speed of college football. He's trying to adjust to that. And you see, Kyle Trask calling him a stud. Jonathan Grenard joking that maybe he needs to fill out his jersey a little bit better.
The Malik Zaire sleeves.
The Malik Zaire sleeves. But he's also saying that this kid is going to be special. So it's a good opportunity for the coaches to get that one-on-one time with them, because bowl prep is so different than any other practices, because you have to kind of balance that these guys are banged up from the season, so you don't want to push them too hard when it comes to preparation for the Virginia Bowl, but it's also a chance to go one-on-one with a lot of these younger players, including the 3 guys who are just on campus now.
As we mentioned, Jacquie, Franciulli, Gators territory, we're looking at early signing day, and we said there are around 24 guys. I'm going to run through them real quick just so you know the names that you should be listening out for on Wednesday. Gervon Dexter, Derek Wingo, Jahari Rogers, Ethan Pouncey, Isaiah Walker, Antoine Powell, Anthony Richardson, Jaquavian Frazier's, Johnny Brown, Leonard Manuel, Mark Britt, Joshua Braun, Jalen Lee, Mordecai McDaniel, Rashad Torrance, Lamar Goods, Avery Helm, Trevez Johnson, Finley Graham, Jonathan Odman, Richard Leonard, Gerald Mincy, Jovan Genevier, I believe I'm saying that right, and Jeremy Crawshaw, kicker. And then we also have transfers, Jordan Pouncey from Texas. And we are not exactly sure. We're still trying to get a clear answer on which class Brenton Cox counts towards, but he might be also considered a transfer in this class as well. Although he did come in this last season.
Still in the other class, because he would be a redshirt this year.
Okay,
so
yeah.
I think he would count as the other class.
Derek Wingo, I want to spend just a minute on him. He is a 5-star on your site on Rivals.
State champion.
Yes, and a new state champion. 5 tackles, 2 sacks the other night as he helped lead St. Thomas Aquinas to a 7A state championship. Derek Wingo is a guy that I think, with Florida losing David Reese and then having the versatility of Amari Burney, that they can move him around, they have a spot that they could feasibly open for him to come in and play pretty much right away. And I believe he's been pretty solid to Florida ever since he did commit. He was originally committed to Penn State, and he flipped to Florida this past summer. Derek Wingo, what kind of impact do you see him having right away?
Oh, he's a kid that would have day one sort of impact, not just from a football perspective, but just from that alpha dog leadership perspective, something that Dan Mullen has wanted in his team since his arrival. Jonathan Greenard kind of fit that mold a little bit. It's sad to see him leave after just 1 year. And I think Derek Wingo, despite his youth and inexperience as far as college football, I think is a guy that could easily step in that room once he gets that experience. He's aggressive. And like you said, if you look at that linebacker room, you're going to have Ventrell Miller and James Houston that are your 2 veterans coming back next year. I think Amari Burney is the big question. Will he stay at linebacker, or because of the depth concerns at star, can we see him move to that position a little bit? I know Marco Wilson is at that position, but who's your number 2? Would Chester Kimbrough be the guy? I've heard a lot of things saying that Chester Kimbrough could be at the position at star. Because I think Todd Grantham really likes that position for Chester Kimbrough. But at the same time, you're looking at, that was a position John Huggins was slated to be at, either number 1 or number 2. Honestly, if John Huggins was on the roster right now, he probably would have got that starting position over Trey Dean. So I could see Amari Burney moving to star. I think he's actually built for that position a little bit better, or even at safety. So I think I could see that. That's why I feel like Derek Wingo can slot into that linebacker role really, really easily. So yeah, Derek Wingo is such a big get for them, and also a big get for a good pipeline to St. Thomas Aquinas. A South Florida kid, a great South Florida kid coming from a good academic background and football background, sort of kids that Dan Mullen wants to keep in Florida.
And I think too, getting him, that makes it 4 or 5 years in a row they've been able to get a kid from St. Thomas Aquinas. Yeah. I'm counting Trey Grimes towards that. He did transfer in from Ohio State, but technically he did come in last year.
Dan Mullen didn't recruit him. That was the other staff that missed out on him. So technically Dan Mullen did recruit him in St. Thomas Aquinas. So we'll give that as a win.
We'll give him Trey Grimes. Last thing, and I'm actually, this is just going to jump back to this. I'm glad you mentioned John Grenard with Derek Wingo, because he has moved around between inside and outside while at St. Thomas. He has played a lot at outside. He could feasibly fit into that buck position as well. As far as the whole Amari Burney, Marco Wilson, Trey Dean, Chester Kimbrough, Kiara Elam, that's a lot of pieces. Maimu Diabate, yes.
Aaron Hopper too, that could play DB and linebacker at high school too. Florida's defensive team the next few years has built a lot. Todd Grantham has done a good job build depth in those positions. Something that they've been lacking. The only part of this defense that lacked more depth was the interior defensive line, which they're handling with this class actually a lot. They've been able to recruit Jalen Lee four-star defensive tackle, committed I think a week and a half ago.
Yes.
Time is just all over the place right now, Kassidy. I don't even know what happened yesterday. So they've been able to recruit the interior defensive line a lot better and get that class balance, because the two former staffs weren't really good at getting class balance. Florida, brought in Adam Schuler and Kyrie Campbell to help out, because honestly, if those two guys weren't there, it would have been really, really scary. And then if you look at it, they have 4 guys as upperclassmen, and then it's a gap, and it's Jalen Humphreys. They're fixing it right now, which is actually why I always mention that I think they might even head to the transfer portal or get at least one more in there, maybe a grad transfer.
Well, we will know a lot more after Wednesday. Currently, Florida is 6th, I believe, in Rivals recruiting rankings classes. Just last minute thing, how do you think Florida's class looks after Wednesday's early signing day is over, heading into the February National Signing Day?
I think they have a potential to really finish strong. They actually have a couple of flip candidates that could come in on Wednesday. We're going to keep an eye on Tim Smith. Like I said, he's a prime flip candidate from Alabama. He visited over the weekend, and a lot of sources are really, really happy about that visit. They think he could flip to Florida. Actually, leading up to the official visit, many people thought, okay, maybe, but then it turned up to maybe it's 70% probability. So I think that's a name to watch out. And then obviously Sam Brown is another name. He also officially visited this weekend. He was meant to sign in February, but now after this weekend, he told reporters that he possibly sign on Wednesday. If he signs on Wednesday, that's a great sign because Florida got the final visit. This is a great opportunity for Florida to kind of say, hey guys, we're actually doing well on recruiting front, getting another top 10 class. And right now they're above Georgia in our recruiting rankings. So what does it say when, Georgia had a bad week in the SEC championship game, and then Florida ends up ahead of you at early signing day national rankings? So this could be a good week for Florida to kind of cement themselves as the power that's coming up in the SEC East in particular.
Have really taken advantage of Florida State and Miami being down this year, going after some in-state talent. So last thing, I'm going to throw one more at you that we did not prepare for. Don't kick me, don't hate me, but I know I'm going to get this question, so I'm just going to ask you, what are their chances are?
I already got it. DeMarcus Bowman.
DeMarcus Bowman, and then Emmitt Smith's son. Okay,
so if Emmitt Smith's son, I'll start with him. So Florida's always going to be involved with Smith because, he's a legacy kid. I've heard a lot of Stanford. He just got his academic improvement 2 weeks ago. He got the admission, and that was a school that he really liked during his recruitment. And Florida has
look at Stanford turns out running backs.
They do turn out running backs. And sometimes, when I talk to legacy kids, especially legacy kids that have a parent that is like Emmitt Smith, may not want to follow completely in their father's footsteps because they want to make their own legacy. And that's something that I've seen a lot in recruitment. So I wouldn't bash the staff in that regards because sometimes it is about stepping away from your father's shadow. Right. But I think they're doing well with other running backs targets right now, like Parrish. So I think Florida has other, options at that position. Now, the thing is with Marcus Bowman, I hate breaking Gator Nation's heart. I really, really do. It's very, very, very unlikely. Now, with Jeff Scott leaving to USF, I was actually thinking, you know what? That's, Clemson. Jeff Scott did such a great job recruiting Florida for Clemson. But I just don't think there's enough time to turn it around. And Dabo Swinney is just a magician when it comes to, recruiting because I touched on it a little bit before. They don't offer kids early. They offer kids mostly in their junior and senior year. They might offer him in the spring of their sophomore year, but it's very rare. But it's just the way they recruit. They have a limited amount of offers. So when they give you an offer, they mean it. And then the kids know they mean it, and they're all over. They know that their motto is #AllIn. They're all in on you when you recruit. So DeMarcus Bowman's had a full court press from Clemson from the get-go, and it's really hard to take kids away from Clemson. Actually, the last guy at Florida to take a kid away from Clemson was actually Mike Rumpf, who took Zach Carter away from Clemson. So it's really hard. I really do think, although there's some chatter in the last few days, you always hear chatter right before early signing day of last-minute miracles. I think you need to pray to every single Christmas miracle that you got, any single Hallmark Lifetime movies and everything. Yes, right to Santa, right to anyone else, and try to get that Christmas miracle because I think it's the least likely scenario.
He's looking at what they were able to do with Travis Etienne this year. I think he even finished high enough in the Heisman rankings that he got a nod during the Heisman ceremony. Of course, that went to Joe Burrow, one of Florida's only losses for the year. But we'll move past that. Jacquie, thank you so much for joining us, for explaining all of this math that we don't normally like to deal with. And stick with both GatorBaitMedia.com and Gators Territory Rivals all the way through early signing day and up to the Orange Bowl. We'll see you then. Until then, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Thank you, guys.